Okay, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about balayage hand painting. We are going to look at this mannequin. It's a male mannequin, actually. He has really long hair. He also has a beard. I sectioned him off in 4 sections, and we're going to get started. Because this is a mannequin and he doesn't have body heat to help activate this lightener, I'm using a 30 volume developer with DPL. So I'm using dual purpose lightener. We do know that it has a potato starch base and it does have the ability to swell. I'm not worried about that because I'm kind of doing a scalp to end process. That's something that we normally wouldn't do on a real person. But because this is a mannequin, I'm not at risk for hot roots, nor am I at risk for burning. So for visual purposes, because I know that what I'm going to do is go back and do a hand painting technique to show you guys how we can balayage and get different effects on the hair, I'm going to just lighten this hair all the way up to see as blonde as we can get it. We're keeping the hair healthy. So keep in mind as a future professional, because you have chosen this industry, this is a very creative field. So you can do anything and you can create anything with hair. If you ever go to a hair show, you're gonna see like so many different cool things and you can draw inspiration from almost anywhere. So me blonding this hair is kind of giving me a blank canvas to do whatever I want because I'm gonna use Pop XG and get the color that I'm looking for. And I can even create other colors because we've discovered using the color wheel that we can create almost any color that we want in the rainbow using our 3 primary colors. So with that information, I'm going to use that, being that I'm going to have a blank canvas. I can pretty much add any color I want and get any end result or effect that I want using those colors. Now remember, anytime we're lightening hair or adding a lightener to hair, we have to do a full saturation. That means that we're going to saturate both sides, front to back, especially when we're trying to do a full canvas. Now, if we were doing a balayage technique where we're doing contouring, then maybe that's not something we want to do. We can choose to lighten just the top or just the bottom, so we don't actually have to do full coverage. But for this particular process, I want to make sure that every strand has lightener on it, so I'm being very thorough with the section sizes that I'm choosing to have. I'm being very thorough with going from the scalp to ends, and I'm making sure that the lightener has a chance to breathe. I'm not smashing the lightener together. I'm allowing it to breathe so it can oxidize, so it could get its fullest potential out of the lightener surface. Now, with this lightening surface, I am using an open air technique. That means I'm not using any type of foils or any type of materials that's going to be used for placement. So this is literally just in the air. So it may slow down the processing time a little bit. That's why I kicked it up to 30 volume developer, to make sure that I get as maximum lightener as possible with this DPL. I am able to get up to 7 levels of lift. So I'm going to try to go for all 7 at this point. I am lightening the hair from scalp to ends. Again, because it's a mannequin, I wouldn't do this on a normal person, but I want to make sure that the hair lifts evenly. And then once I get the levels of lift that I want, I'm going to go ahead and rinse this hair with cool water and shampoo this lightener out. What's another thing that's really important is to make sure that I'm working at a steady pace. Notice that I'm just going through the hair, taking the same sections. I'm very consistent with my section sizes. I'm very intentional on making sure that I'm saturating the hair on both the front and the back. I'm making sure that I'm not just smashing the lightener in, that I am smoothing this lightener inside the hair strands, and I'm making sure that I have really nice coverage, because it's very important. If you notice, I don't have lightener all dripping down the mannequin's neck, and I'm making sure that the sections are clean and that they're very intentional, that whenever I do lighten the hair, I'm avoiding holidays and those type of things. So all of these things that you have to keep in mind as you go throughout the hair. All right, we're almost done, and he seems to be very pleased. If you notice that the hair is fully saturated throughout, and even in a minute, I'm going to show you the back a little bit, and you can kind of see that it's already lifting, so it's lifting beautifully. I'm making sure that his hair is going to be fully saturated, and it's going to give me a nice canvas to produce very vivid colors. So if you want these colors to be strong, you want your colors to be vivid and bold, you want to make sure that the hair is light enough to produce those type of colors. Now, with anything upon completion, we want to make sure that we check our work. We want to make sure that whenever we lighten the hair, that we go back and verify that there's no areas that we may have missed. We are human, so we want to make sure that those areas are completely saturated. We want to make sure that there's no spots or holidays left in the hair that could be left for question, because unfortunately, this hair is very red, it's very ginger. So in the event if I missed a spot, I may have ginger hair where I wouldn't want it, and unfortunately, it may be quite hard to blend, especially if I'm going with vivid colors from the Pop XG line. It's going to be very hard to hide a ginger piece that's kind of poking out. So I'm going through the hair, and I'm just making sure, checking my work, that it's thoroughly saturated. And then you see I'm noticing some spots that may be a little bit dry, so I'm going to resaturate and make sure that that's in there. And I'm opening up the hair to make sure that I'm not just smothering it with lightener or smashing the lightener through with my fingers. Just about done checking my work and going back through and making sure that my pieces are saturated and thorough. We're going to talk a little bit about the blonding services and how it works, and tones, and how can we tone out, neutralize, and enhance different colors so we can get what we want for our final end result. All right, guys, for the most part, we have 100% blonde hair, and we have variations of what degrees of blonde we have. In some instances, we can see a little bit of orange, we see a little bit of yellow, and we want to cancel out all of these colors so we can have a nice, clean palette for the color that we're going to apply on the hair. So let's talk about toning options. We can go anywhere from translucent to opaque. So if we wanted something very sheer, we can do like flash finish. Flash finish is only for about 10 minutes on the hair. It has a shampoo base and it'll rinse out really nicely, and all you have to do is condition afterwards. We have our PM Shines, and PM Shines is very healthy for the hair because it actually replenishes the amino acids in the hair. So this is a very good option. However, it is demi-permanent, so it will rinse out eventually. Then we have the Demi. The Demi is going to give a little bit more coverage. So as opposed to PM Shine is more of a pantyhose, and the Demi is more of a stocking. So the Demi is definitely going to give it a little bit more opaqueness. It's going to give it a little bit more coverage, so it'll cover a little bit more, where the PM Shines will allow a little bit more light into it, so it'll give you more dimension that way. Then we have the Color and the Color XG. This is going to give you optimal coverage, which is going to cover anything that you're trying to cover at that level. This is another visual so you can understand exactly what translucency is all the way to opaqueness. And if you notice our flash finish, it's super sheer. It's almost like lip balm, not so much opaqueness to it, not so much pigment, not so much color. And then we have a lip gloss for our PM Shines, and our Demi is more of a lip stain. And then our the color, NXG is more of a lipstick. All right, so there's a word called metamerism. It's actually the play of light and color. This is very important, especially when you decide to lighten hair or even color hair. The amount of light and depth that's going to go into the hair service, where you color the hair, that's going to determine a lot of things as far as what you're able to see with the naked eye, as far as like translucency and opacity. You're going to be able to see all of that depending on the light that you're coloring the hair in. So it's very important when it comes to toning and when it comes to seeing depth and light inside of the hair as far as dimension is concerned. Metamerism is very important. So this is the play of light on color, and I'm going to explain to you how it works. Incandescent light. Incandescent light is seen as regular light bulbs, or is seen in regular light bulbs. So the ones that you purchase from your store that you probably have in like your lamps or your ceiling fixtures at home. These lights typically favor warm tones unless otherwise stated. Like sometimes they come in lights that says natural light or mimics natural light the most. But if you just buy a regular incandescent light bulb, these are going to favor warm tones, and they're going to mute tones such as green, blue, or gray. So a lot of cool tones, they're going to go ahead and mute out. And if you notice in the picture, the warm tones stand out more. All right, so when we discuss metamerism, we're talking about the different types of light that change the tone that you see. So here we have the same head of highlights, and as you can see, in different lighting, it's going to show us different colors or different shades of that color. This is going to become very important, especially whenever you upload pictures to your Instagram or to your Facebook or any social media outlet. It's very important to take pictures in the most natural light as possible, which is going to give you the best lighting. You definitely don't want to saturate your pictures with filters, because unfortunately those are not going to give the true story of what your work will look like or can look like. So you definitely don't want to do yourself a disservice by doing that. LED lights. LED lights are true to natural light. They're more flattering on skin tones, and when applying makeup and hair color, LED lights are more prone to be true to its color. That's why ring lights are very important. A lot of people love ring lights because they kind of mimic the natural sunlight because of the LED lighting. So the first lighting we're going to talk about is fluorescent light. So fluorescent lights are going to be the lights that you find in department stores. Most likely in your school settings, you'll have a lot of fluorescent lights, especially if you think about like growing up in middle school and elementary school, high school. You'll see a lot of fluorescent lights. These lights have the accent on cool tones, which is really cool. They diffuse capability and reduce shadows on the hair. So this actually gives you really nice lighting when it comes to cool tones. You'll see more true to tone, and the cool tones will stand out a little bit more. Up next, we have pure white light. So this is best for color evolution. So if you're going to like a series of color, pure white light is going to be your best color because it's going to show you the results from start to finish. It's helpful in color areas, and it's supplied by the sun. So this is going to give you the purest form of white light. Alright guys, now let's talk about hand painting. What is hand painting? Hand painting, also known as balayage, is simply the act of painting lightener or color on the hair to achieve a lived-in, highlighted look. So basically, balayage is the term for hand painting. So when people come in and they say, oh, I want a balayage, that doesn't necessarily mean they want a color effect. That hand painting in itself is the balayage. So what they're asking for is more of an ombre, which means that the hair goes from light to dark or from dark to light, whichever way you look at it. But hand painting in itself is called balayage. There are a few key factors when considering doing a balayage or a hand painting technique. The consultation is very key. You also want to talk about, during your consultation, maintenance. How often is your guest waiting between appointments to get their hair touched up? You also want to talk about toners and refreshers, because sometimes whenever a guest comes in for a toning service or a refresher service, especially like the one that we're going to show you today, it's important to discuss how often should we see them. Gray coverage or regrowth, what does that look like? How often or how fast do their hair grow, and how much can they tolerate with seeing those little grays pop through? Conditioning treatments, most of the time, especially if we're lightening hair, we are reducing the amount of protein that's going to be left behind in the hair. We are rearranging some hair bonds, so we want to make sure that we can reconstruct the hair and get it back to health. So it's super important. And also, last but not least, haircuts. How often are we trimming those ends? Because that is the oldest part of the hair. So we want to make sure that those ends come off so that way the hair can remain healthy. During your consultation is also super important, especially during a hand painting technique such as balayage, is to make sure that we understand dimension. So how much dimension does your guest really want to see? Where do they want to see the dimension? Do they want it like mostly in the front where you can see a lot of it, or do they want it mostly in the back? What tones do you want to see? Do you want to see warm tones? Do you want to see cool tones? It says here, using pictures can be a great way to get on the same page with dimension. 9 times out of 10, your guest will bring you a visual of exactly what they want, and it's better to understand how dimension works, especially sometimes they want to see a little bit more natural, so they want to keep a lot of their natural hair into the highlights, or if they want to go full out fantasy and go like really bold with primary colors and reduce the amount of dimension of the natural and get more dimension in with the fantasy colorism. So it really just depends on what the guest wants. This is a good time to allow guest preference to be a part of your consultation, so that way you can understand exactly what he or she wants in their service. With our lightening systems, we have a various amount of lighteners that you can use to get to the desired lift that you may want. Skylight is an excellent choice if you're going to do hand painting. It is a hand painting clay-based lightener, so it will harden to some degree and allow you to place lightener on top of itself, like lighten sections on top of itself, because it does kind of create that shell for you. That's an excellent way, especially for hand painting techniques, to get what you want. Right here I have a photo of Lighten Up. Lighten Up is super great because it's very gentle. It's a gentle lightener. It's on the scalp and off the scalp, so it's really a really good bonus for like kids that may want like this blue streak in their hair to support like their football team or whatever team that they're playing for, or even if your guest has super fine hair that you don't want to take her too high too fast. Lighten Up is a great alternative. And then we have Synchro Lift. So Synchro Lift is our ultra quick blue powder lightener. It has like that violet tint to it, so you can see the tones more true to tones, what you're working with. And we have also have DPL. So DPL is going to be our potato-based lightener, potato starch-based lightener, excuse me, which is going to give you optimal results also because it has like a lot of muscle in it. So we have a various amount of lighteners to choose from, so that way you guys can have these options depending on what the guest needs. Now, making sure that we understand haircuts and hair coloring together, because what's a good cut without a color? These two are a marriage, so they belong together. So what the guest comes in or what the guest leaves with, the cutting effect, will affect the way that the color lays. So let's talk a little bit about cutting techniques. With the one lick technique, the effect is going to be zero elevation, so all the hair is going to fall to one place. It's going to give you maximum density, and it's going to give you minimal movement. So our one length definitely gives you that blunt cut, and it allows you to have minimal movement. So especially for our fine hair guests or our low density guests, this will give them the appearance of having more hair. Color placement key points. You want to place the color on the top of the head shape for maximum results. So this is going to give us, and then there's an example right here in the right corner, how that should look to make sure that you're going to have like more of strands and bands, because it's going to be a sheet of color, like a wall of color, and it's going to give you more coverage and allow it to look more fuller as an end result. For our graduation cutting technique, Of course, our graduation is going to be from 1 to 89 degrees of elevation. This is going to be a buildup of weight. So of course, graduation builds weight, and it's going to give us a side to side movement effect. And the reason why we get this side to side effect is because our color placement is going to be on a diagonal. So we're going to place the color on the top of the head and the sides of the head shapes. We're going to avoid working the color below the graduation line. So anything that's under 3 inches, we definitely want to make sure that we avoid those areas, because what's going to happen is, because of the graduation and the buildup of weight that we have, so many choppy layers or so many choppy areas of graduation, it can look very spotty. So we want to avoid doing that. So 3 inches or below, we're going to leave that as a solid wall of color. And then everything above that we can use at a diagonal line and place our color there for a nice side to side effect. And then our layers, of course, layers going to be 90 degrees or more elevation. This is going to do one thing, that's remove weight. This is going to give us maximum movement. So this helps promote the movement in the head shape, especially with the layered haircut. So we also want to place this hair on a vertical axis, placing the color throughout the head shape, except on short layers. So we want to make sure that with our long layers, we want to do this on a vertical placement, so that when the hair moves, because we have that maximum movement, you're going to see the color throughout the head shape. So just for a visual purpose, you can see clearly on the one lens, just having those sheets and walls of color, how it ends up from the top of the head to the bottom. It gives us those nice walls of color, and even though she does have dimension and highlights throughout her hair, you can see that it definitely looks a lot more fuller, as opposed to if we would have put this on any other axis. We also have our graduation, and if you notice where it's very short and tapered, it's one solid block of color, and that also adds to the depth of the haircut, so it makes it look really high as far as the stack is concerned. And then you see on the inside or on the top canvas that she has her hair colored and placed on a diagonal, so you can see that movement in the dimension inside the crevices of the haircut. And then of course with layers, you can clearly tell that this is a vertical placement with these layers, and you can see the dimension throughout the haircut because it was placed on the vertical wall. Okay, for my visual alerters, this is another color placement and effect chart, just so you can have a stronger visual of what we just spoke about. For color placement, for a horizontal placement, the effect is going to be strong, a wall or block of color. It's very symmetrical and it falls to one point. And these are examples to your right. You can see where it goes from the top of the head, and it's just one sheet or wall all the way down for a horizontal color placement. And on a diagonal color placement, our effect is going to be more diffused. It's going to give you sheets of color and it falls to different points. So this is very good for a graduated haircut. And if you notice in the previous photo that her hair was definitely diffused, it wasn't just all in one area, and it was sheets of color and it fell to different points. So, and you can notice that in these two examples where that would happen. And then lastly, we have our vertical color placement, and the effects are very strong. It's strands and bands or stripes of colors. So you can see nice, clear strands, bands, or even ribbons, if you would like to look at it like that, of colors. It all falls to one point, except it's more in the vertical area as opposed to horizontal. And for layers, especially long layers, this is an excellent way to display your work. Okay, so a little bit more about color placement and effect. Horizontally, you can see on her fringe area how horizontal placement gives us those nice sheets of color. It's just from the top to all the way to the end how that placement looks. And then on the diagonal, and I love this because her hair is curled, you can clearly see that on the diagonal where the movement is, how it's diffused throughout the hair, and how you can really see the dimension throughout the hair. And then our vertical placement. So say for instance, if this is on the one lens, how this would look on the vertical placement. You see clearly her ribbons of color and how that just falls really nicely, and it displays the color really well. Now here we're going to talk a little bit about saturation. We do talk about saturation a lot in the clinic classroom because it's very important to understand how saturation should look. All hair should not be fully saturated, and to some degree, of course, the coverage needs to be there for saturation, but we have saturation, we describe it into light, medium, and heavy, especially when we're lightening hair to understand dimension. Saturation plays a very key part in what that looks like. So if you look to my immediate left, you can see how the saturation is very light. It's very subtle highlights. It almost looks sun-kissed, as if she was just in the sun and she has something very light on the hair. And then we have medium saturation, which is very intentional. You can tell that she came in and she's requesting highlights. She wants to see those highlights and she wants a little bit bolder statement. And then lastly, we have a heavy saturation, which gives you more coverage, like maximum coverage, where you can clearly see that this was intentional as well, but this was definitely going for more a bolder look, where you can see that most of her hair is highlighted and very minimal of her natural hair is showing. Saturation plays a very key part, especially when we're doing a balayage or hand painting technique, because we have two ways that we can saturate the hair. So we have a push-through way, and then we have a surface way. So pushing through, it means that we're applying the lightener or color through the ends of the hair to create a solid end result. Surface painting means that applying the lightener or color only to a portion or surface of the hair to create dimension throughout the hair. So when we're pushing through, especially if we want heavy saturation, pushing through would apply in this situation because we want to make sure that the hair is saturated on both sides. The top side on the surface from what we see on the canvas level and underneath. So if you were to pull out a subsection and you were to balayage or hand paint the hair, if you want to push it through, we're going to make sure that the hair goes, or the lightener goes completely through the top side as well as the bottom side. With surface painting, sometimes we only want the surface, the very top surface, to be seen because we want to keep that dimension. And doing a surface painting will help you keep the dimension throughout. So say for instance, if you contoured the hair, you only painted a portion of the hair, you're going to get that. By doing surface painting just on the top, you'll have more dimension. Or even if you painted the entire top of the hair, but you did not push it through the bottom, you'll get dimension there as well because the bottom will be darker. And if you were to curl the hair, you'll see more dimension that way.